Applying to undergraduate medicine in the UK can seem like quite a daunting task. There's definitely a few things you need to consider and a lot of steps to prepare for the actual application process. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jackery and I'm a year 13 student who's just finished his A-levels in biology, chemistry, maths and psychology. And in this video, I'm going to be going through how to apply to undergraduate medicine, the entire process and everything you really need to know before starting your journey to apply to medicine. This is going to be quite a lengthy video, so as usual, timestamps will be in the description below so you can jump around and find exactly what you're looking for without wasting any time. The first and arguably most crucial step in applying to undergrad medicine in the UK is choosing the right A-levels. This is essentially the first step of your journey, and if you pick the wrong A-levels, then you'll really be shooting yourself in the foot when it comes time to actually applying. In terms of A-levels, there are certain subjects that are compulsory or very important, and there are also optional subjects that are recommended but not crucial. In order to keep as many doors open in terms of which medical schools you can apply to, you need to pick biology and chemistry for A-level. From what I've seen, all medical schools in England require A-level chemistry as a compulsory A-level, clearly stating it on their website. And a large majority of universities also quote biology A-level as a compulsory A-level. Now, not every university in the country requires A-level biology, and I think this is an important thing to know because when you think about medicine, you might think that A-level biology is the most important A-level, but in actual fact, chemistry is the most important A-level when it comes to applying to medicine. However, by doing both, you leave your doors as open as possible, especially when you start looking at a lot of the top universities in England like UCL, Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial, and all these universities quote biology as a compulsory A-level. To put it simply, you definitely need chemistry, and there will also be a high likelihood that you need biology, but it's not going to be 100% compulsory for all medical schools in this country. And for that reason, it's really important to do your research, go on the website and see what each individual university says, especially the ones that you're considering applying to. Now, that's the compulsory subjects out of the way. It should be noted that most people in this country do 3 A-levels. That's because 3 A-levels is the minimum requirement for all universities across the country, not just medical schools. Once you pick biology and chemistry, the third subject can technically be whatever you want. But there are certainly some subjects that are highly recommended for med students. Again, not 100% compulsory or required, but highly recommended. One of the most popular subjects for medical applicants that's not compulsory but is recommended is A-level maths. In my opinion, the main reason A-level maths is so highly recommended and a lot of medical applicants either take it or will tell you to take it is because of the entrance or admissions exams that you have to sit for medicine in the UK, which I'll get into in a bit. Maths definitely plays a big role in these exams, and not being proficient in maths can definitely make it a lot harder to score highly. Again, you don't have to do A-level maths. A lot of people I know didn't do A-level maths and still did the entrance exams, but doing A-level maths might give you that slight bit more proficiency that might help you score higher. Another recommended subject is physics. Essentially, doing a lot of STEM-based or science-based subjects can really help increase your chance of applying to medicine, not because you need it for your application, but because in these sciences there are a lot of transferable and important skills that universities might look for in a medical applicant. A lot of critical thinking, analyzing, and just general all-round skills in science that are really transferable can make you a really attractive applicant. Although I do want to once again reiterate that apart from A-level biology and chemistry, your third subject can be whatever you want. I know a lot of medical applicants I've talked to have taken biology, chemistry and maths, but I also know a handful of applicants that have taken a completely different subject as their third A-level. I know one applicant who took A-level French and they're still applying to do medicine next year. If anything, maybe doing a completely different third A-level can be something that helps you stand out, especially if it's a subject you really enjoy. Now, in terms of grade requirement in England, the minimum grade requirement from what I've seen is AAA. So you need to get a minimum of A in each of your subjects. In terms of applying for medicine, I don't think universities really go below that grade requirement unless you're applying to foundation year medicine, which isn't something I'm really going to talk about in this video. A large majority of medical schools in England also quote A-star AA as their grade requirement, and in my opinion, those are the grades you should be aiming for in order to give you the best chance possible of getting into your chosen medical school. But again, this is where your research is important, and it's really a good idea to go onto the university's website, go on the medicine page and just see what they're saying in terms of requirements. The next thing I'm going to talk about is UCAS and the personal statement. In this segment, I'm going to be going through what UCAS is, the logistics of picking a university, and what to expect in terms of a personal statement. In the UK, all university applications are dealt with by an organisation called UCAS. They essentially act as the middle ground between students and universities, acting as an almost messenger between the two. The entire application process takes place on the UCAS website and involves putting in your details, your past grades, as well as any predicted grades you have, and then picking your universities. You also have to put in a personal statement, which, like I said, I'll go into more detail a bit later on. After you've done all of that, you will have someone write up your reference. Usually this will be a teacher or head of year. For me, my biology tutor and head of sixth form wrote my reference, and after all of that is done, then it gets sent off to the universities, or more so that you hit submit and then UCAS will send it off to all the universities. They're the ones who send off your application, and they're also the ones who will get back to you if any university replies, either with an offer, an interview, or even a rejection. Now, in terms of picking your option, UCAS gives everyone 5 options to choose from. You can apply to up to 5 different universities for the same course, or you can even apply to the same university for multiple courses, each course you apply for obviously taking up one of your 5 options. However, there are some general rules that you need to know. For example, you can't apply to both Oxford and Cambridge in the same year. With Oxford, you either pick one or the other, but you can't actually pick both. Now, this isn't a rule that only applies to medical school applicants. This is a rule that applies to everyone, and it's worth knowing before you think about what universities you want to pick. However, there is a rule that only applies to medical students. Well, it also applies to dental students and students taking veterinary science, but obviously this video is only about medical students, so that's all I'll be talking about. And what this rule is that of your 5 available options, only 4 of them can actually be for medicine, with the 5th one having to be for a different course altogether. Now, I think the main reason for this rule is that medicine can be quite competitive, so UCAS don't want medical applicants to send off all their applications for medicine and risk getting 5 rejections. Most medical applicants end up picking 4 medical schools, and then their 5th option is usually for biomedical science, which is also what I did. The main reason for this is that in the UK and in England, you have an option where if you do biomedical science, you can potentially transfer into medicine midway through your course. This is more competitive, and obviously I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because this video is about undergraduate medicine, but that option is there if you want to do more research into it. When picking your 4 medical schools, it's also recommended to pick universities that range in ranking. In terms of grade requirements, this can be a bit difficult because most medical schools in the UK have very similar grade requirements, but it's also worth going on their website and seeing how they rate admissions tests and how they are with interviews, because there are some universities that are slightly more lenient when it comes to admission test scores or how you do in the interview, and it's worth looking into all of that. And that way, if you have a range of different universities, even if the higher end universities say no, you still have a chance with some of the maybe lower ranking universities. At the end of the day, medicine is medicine, and no matter what university you go to, you will always come out the other end with the same degree as everyone else. So really don't shoot yourself in the leg by only picking top universities unless you're super confident. The next thing I want to talk about in terms of medical school application process and the whole UCAS process is the personal statement. This is almost like a CV, and it's your opportunity to advertise yourself to the university you're applying to and let them know why you think you're an appropriate candidate for their course and why they should let you have a place to study medicine there. There are definitely some requirements of the personal statement that I'm going to get into. Firstly, there is a character and line limit. The rule is that you can't go above 4,000 characters, which sounds a lot more than it actually is, and you also can't exceed 47 lines. Now, your limit depends on which one you actually meet first. What I mean by this is if you've reached 4,000 characters, even if you've written less than 47 lines, then you've reached the limit of how much you can write. And if you reach 47 lines, even if you have less than 4,000 characters, you've reached the limit of what you can write and you can't add any more. Now, tracking the 4,000 characters can be quite an easy thing to do. Most writing softwares like Microsoft Word will have a feature where you can count the characters. However, counting the 47 lines can be a bit difficult because it's all dependent on the metric that UCAS use. You might have a document that's 47 lines long, but when you copy and paste it into UCAS, it's a lot more. So for that reason, I think you should definitely make use of websites that allow you to see how many lines you've written in terms of how UCAS measure it. I'll leave a link in the description to the website I used when I was applying to medicine, and it's a really useful website to just check how much you've written. It will tell you how many characters you've written and how many lines you've got, and that way you can keep track of whether or not you've written too much and whether or not you need to shorten how much you've written. This is something that's really important to note because you actually can't submit a UCAS personal statement that doesn't meet this requirement. If it's over 4,000 characters or over 47 lines, then UCAS physically won't let you submit off to the universities. And if you've left it too late, then this can be a really big issue. So it's definitely something to keep in mind when it comes to writing a personal statement. Now, obviously there's a lot more to the personal statement, and I'm considering making a video about it in the future, hopefully sometime soon, so keep an eye out for that, and hopefully that should be really helpful in telling you how to go about writing a personal statement. Another thing to know about the whole UCAS process that's slightly different for medical students or medical applicants is the date you have to submit your application. Now, the UCAS deadline is January 15th of the year you're planning to start your course. So for example, if you're planning to start your course in September 2021, then your deadline will be January 15th, 2021. However, if you're applying to either medicine, dentistry or veterinary sciences, or you're applying to either Oxford or Cambridge, then your deadline is actually October 15th of the previous year. Which means, if I use the same example, if your course is set to start in September 2021, that means you'll have had to have sent off your application on October 15th, 2020. Now this is important to note because that means the summer after your first year doing A-levels, you'll basically be a few months off having to send off your application, and so preparation is so key, and you have to make sure that you start a lot earlier than everyone else. I remember when I submitted my personal statement, it was significantly earlier than some people had even started writing or thinking about writing their personal statement. The third thing you need to start thinking about, and probably a very important aspect of the medical school application process, is admissions exam. For medicine in the UK, there are two admissions exams that you need to know about, and they're the UCAT and the BMAT. Something to definitely know is that no university in the UK and in England require both. They will either require the UCAT or the BMAT, but never both together. That being said, you are still allowed to sit both, especially if you choose universities that require the BMAT and you also choose universities that require the UCAT. For this reason, it's definitely important for you to do your research and know what admissions exams the university you want to apply to requires. Just to save you a bit of time, I'll put on the screen right now the universities that require the BMAT. And a general rule is that any university that's not in this list will require the UCAT in this country. The reason I'm putting the BMAT list up only is because for that reason, the UCAT list is quite long. Now, both exams are similar in some senses, but for the most part are completely different. And it's really hard to know how universities use them because universities don't actually tell students what they look at in terms of their admissions exams. There are some universities that put a lot of weight on the admissions exams and have a certain cut-off point that they need you to meet. And there are some universities that use it quite leniently and only use it as a filter process to cut off some applicants. In some universities, for example, like Cambridge or Oxford, the BMAT score you get is very important in determining whether or not you even get an interview. Whereas with other universities, it might be used as only a last resort if they're unsure which applicants to pick. Again, there's not much information on it, but if you do go on the university's website, they do talk about it briefly and you might be able to get some insight based on what they say on their website. Again, this is where your own research is very crucial. In one video, I physically can't go through every university in the UK and England, and so it's really important that you do a bit of research and go on their website. No university will really give you a clear cut-off point, and one of the main reasons for that is because the grade boundaries shift around every year, and these exams are mainly based on national average, so it fluctuates year by year, but it's still worth doing a bit of research into it. Now, I'll very briefly summarize the two entrance exams. Again, if you want a separate video on that, do let me know in the comments below and I'll consider making a more in-depth video about the exams. But firstly, the BMAT, which consists of 3 sections: Section 1, Section 2 and Section 3. Section 1 is called the Thinking Skills section and it's composed of both critical thinking and problem-solving questions. When I say problem-solving, what that essentially means is kind of like logical puzzles, and by critical thinking that's essentially like being given a body of text and having to read that and then answer a question based on that, and usually that involves having to extrapolate certain bits of information from the text. It definitely sounds easier when I simplify it like that, but it can be challenging and revising for it is very important. Section 2 is the Scientific Knowledge and Application section, and it essentially involves answering questions from biology, chemistry, maths and physics. You essentially have an even split of each of those subjects and you have to answer questions based on those. Now, don't worry, you don't have to do all those subjects for A-levels because the content in this exam is supposed to be at GCSE level, which means everyone should technically be able to answer the questions. And it's nothing, again, a bit of revision can't help you to catch up with. Both Section 1 and Section 2 get marked and then are given a score out of 9, with 1 being the lowest and 9 being the highest you can get. But the scores do go up in decimal increments, meaning you can also get scores like 5.4 or 6.2, etc. The final section is an essay writing section where you write an essay based on a prompt or sentence that they give you, and this also gets marked. This section is marked a little bit differently to the first 2 sections in that you firstly get given a number from 1 to 5, which basically rates the content of your essay. 5 being that the content is very good and related to the prompt or sentence they gave you, and 1 being really poor and totally did not answer the question. You also get given a letter from A to E, which rates the level of English and grammar that you use, with A being that you use really good grammar, punctuation, spelling, everything's perfect, and E being that you did really poorly. About the UCAT, this is a bit of a longer exam in terms of the fact that it has more sections. The UCAT exam is comprised of 5 sections that I'll put on the screen right now. I'm not going to go into too much detail about each of the sections like I did for the BMAT, mainly because there are quite a few more and this video isn't really about going in depth into the admissions exams. Just know that the first 4 sections you get given a score between 300 to 900, with 900 being the very best and 300 being the lowest you can get. And the final section is marked a little differently, where you get given a band from either 1 to 4. So you can get band 1, band 2, band 3 and band 4, with band 1 being the highest grade you can score in that section and band 4 being the worst. And that's basically the whole gist of the admissions exam portion of applying to medical school in the UK and England. To summarize, you'll definitely need to be sitting either the UCAT or the BMAT, or even both in some cases, like what I did, mainly because the range of universities that I applied for, half of them required the BMAT and half of them required the UCAT. Definitely do your research to 1, see which exam you need to sit, and 2, to get a rough idea of how well you need to actually do in the exam. It's definitely important to know all this before you sit your admissions test, so that you can revise for it properly and also apply for it ahead of time. For the UCAT, you'll have to book it yourself, but for the BMAT, my sixth form actually booked it for me, and I think whatever institute you're at, whether it's college or sixth form, they will sort it out for you. But always just make sure to ask them about it so that you don't get shocked suddenly when they tell you that they booked it for you. But do let them know and follow them up on it so that they know that you want to sit the exam, and that way they can book it for you. The main reason it's like this, where you have to book the UCAT yourself but the BMAT can be booked by your school, is because the UCAT can be sat on any day between June to September, I believe, whereas the BMAT is sat on a specific day, and everyone in the country will be sitting the BMAT on the same day and at the same time. The UCAT is much easier for them to randomize the questions, and for that reason you don't have to sit on a specific day, but this isn't the case for the BMAT, which is a bit more stringent and strict in terms of when you can sit. Your BMAT and UCAT scores will only be valid for a single year, so make sure you get them done and you don't accidentally miss them, because then you'll have to wait an entire year before you can resit them. Now, the next thing you need to worry about in terms of the whole medical school application process in England is interviews. Now, with a lot of subjects at university levels, interviews can be quite rare. Apart from Cambridge and Oxford, most universities don't conduct interviews for the majority of their courses. However, for subjects like medicine or dentistry, there are always going to be interviews that you need to sit. I think the main reason for this is that it's such a competitive course and there's so many people applying for it that they need another filter to be able to cut people down. It's also quite a difficult subject, so they need to just make sure that you're the type of student they are looking for at their university. As far as I'm aware, every medical school in the UK conducts interviews for their students. So this is 1, something you need to be aware of, and 2, something you definitely need to prepare for. Another thing to note is that different universities in England have different interview style, and again, this is something you need to research and find out for yourself. There are 2 types of medical interviews that you might face. The first one is the traditional panel interview, where you essentially have an interviewer or group of interviewers in front of you, and they're asking you a set of questions which you answer. This is probably the interview style most people are used to and most people have definitely heard of. This is also the interview style that I sat when I applied for UCL. I'll leave a link to that video either on the screen somewhere so that you can check it out if it sounds interesting to you. In the video, I document the whole process of receiving my offer and preparing for my interview. So if you want some insight on how the process is like, it might be worth checking that video out. The second style of interviews that you might face is called a multiple mini interview, or MMI for short. These are a relatively new style of interviews, but they're definitely becoming more and more popular amongst medical schools, and a lot of medical schools are actually implementing them. These interviews usually consist of a number of stations which you have to go to throughout the duration of your interview. Each station roughly lasts, for example, 5 minutes or however many minutes they tell you. And they usually involve more than just being asked a standard question. Now, the benefit of these interviews arguably is that when you go to each station, you get a completely new interviewer, which means you'll have a whole different chance to set another first impression. This is really useful for if the previous station maybe didn't go too well and you get a fresh start with the next step of the interview. Now, like I mentioned, these interviews can consist of more than just the standard questions that you might expect for a medical interview, and you might also be given some scenario-based tasks that you need to act out in order to show certain skills like empathy or morality. And so it's definitely important that you prepare for those style of questions as well if you have an MMI that you need to prepare for. It's important to know what type of interview your university will use, because that way you can tailor your preparation for that university and for that interview style. In medicine, with the level of competition there is amongst students in England and also international students, it's definitely important to turn up to your interview prepared, and so at the very least know what type of interview you're sitting, because I guarantee you, if you go into your interviews with no preparation, your interviewers will catch on and it won't leave a very good impression. Now for the final part of the application process, and that's the conditional offer element of applying to medicine. Once you've submitted your application, if you've been lucky enough to receive an interview, after you do your interview, you then have to wait for the universities to get back to you on whether or not they're going to give you a conditional offer. Now, universities vary in the time they take to give offers. I've known some universities can take up to 8 weeks to get back to you, whereas other universities take about 21 days. I'll leave a link in the description below to a really useful website by 6med. And what this website essentially does is it gives you a list of every UK medical school, and you can search up the medical school you want to apply to, and they will give you the rough dates in which they either conduct interviews and how long it usually takes them to give out offers. And that way you can kind of ease your anxiety and know that if a university is taking long, then it's not that abnormal, especially if they usually take that long to give you your offer. I know when I applied to St. George's, it took them about 8 to 9 weeks before they got back to me with my conditional offer. So it's not abnormal to have to wait quite a while for universities to get back to you. Now, most people applying to undergraduate medicine haven't actually finished their A-levels, because the way it works is you usually apply before your A-levels are actually finished. And for this reason, you get given what's called a conditional offer, whereby the offer you're given is based on what grades you get on results day for your A-levels. Most conditional offers are A star AA. Like I mentioned, there are some unis that have the grade requirements AAA. And what this essentially means is that on results day, if you get those grades that they tell you to get, then your offer is secured. However, if you don't get those grades, then they automatically revoke your offer. Now, once you've received all your conditional offers, or even some rejections if you're unlucky, you have to pick a firm and insurance university on the UCAS website. What firm and insurance essentially means is that firm is basically your first option and insurance is essentially your second option, which you automatically pick if you don't get the grades for your first option, but you do get the grade for your second option. It's always important to pay attention when you pick your firm and insurance. Some universities actually lower their grade requirements for you if you pick them as your firm. So for me, when I got my offer from St. George's, they told me that if I made them my firm, then they would reduce my offer from an A star AA to only an AAA. But not all universities do this. For example, when I received my offer from UCL for medicine, they didn't give me any offer like this where I could reduce the grade requirements if I picked them as my firm. Also pay attention to the grade requirements. Make sure your firm university has a higher grade requirement than your insurance. Now for medicine, this can be quite difficult because most unis have a similar grade requirement. But if you do have a varied grade requirements for the schools you pick, then definitely make sure your firm is the higher grade requirement. The reason for this is that if your firm has a lower grade requirement than your insurance, even if you get the highest grade requirements you need for your insurance, your firm will always take priority, which is really important to know. Looking out for these things, like when universities lower their grade boundaries, can be a really important thing for some people, especially if you're slightly anxious about the grade requirements for medical school and you're not completely certain you can meet them. It's definitely important to look into things like these, especially if you want to go directly into undergraduate medicine. And with that, we have reached the end of the video. So if you enjoyed the video or found it useful, leave a like, subscribe, and let me know what you thought in the comments below, or if you have any questions about this video. It was quite a lengthy video and there might have been a few things that I missed out, so if there was and you have a question about it, feel free to ask below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. That's been all from me, and goodbye.